Well, we had a wonderful meeting with Bill back in September, and then I very sadly heard that Bill passed away a couple of weeks ago.
He was ill within about a week or so after he was chosen to be the figure for the sculpture, and unfortunately he died.
But it became very clear that we still wanted to use Bill, and the fact that Bill had passed away is almost more poignant and more important to the story and the story of the garden.
It just highlights the fact that we don't have a lot of time now to honour the people from the Second World War. They are becoming less and less, and within 10 years we won't have that physical connection with them anymore.
So here we are, we're in Bromsgrove at Central Scanning, and we've done a series of 6 scans of soldiers in various positions, and also a young lad called Lewis who's representing Bill in the garden at Chelsea. So he stood in as a 21, 22-year-old as he landed on the beach, and he's just pausing and having a conversation with himself, narrating the garden. Once we've had the original idea about how we were going to use sculptures, we needed to source uniforms to produce these model images by 3D scanning. And I've been dealing with a company called Flame in Torquay, and they are all about the detail, and it had to be authentic. Everything had to be right, from the packs that they carried to the rifles and Sten guns that the troops landed beaches with. So I've got 3 of my friends who will be working on the garden at Chelsea to wear the uniforms, the webbing, belts, gas mask cases, bayonet holders. We were trying to recreate that feeling these soldiers have just landed on the beach. So one's tripped over, one's helping to pick him up, another one's a commando who's perhaps the first person to land and is storming up to the beach to get to his objective to protect the rest of the troops.
It's another way of immersing people in the experience without physically having to be there. To be able to walk into it will hopefully give people a little bit of a realisation of what's been achieved. It's keeping the connection, it's keeping the memories of these people alive.
We're trying to connect to subsequent generations to explain what these humble, unassuming guys did and why they ended up on a stormy beach in June 1944.
My interest was piqued when I realised it was going to actually be a portrait. It's not something I normally do, and it's quite difficult. The main thing was to make sure that the pose of the scans worked, the sort of physical way that the figures are relating to each other.
I brought Bill's uniform, his blazer, trousers and his tie and his beret and everything. So it's quite poignant that this is the last great outing before it goes with him to the grave, really, which is quite nice.
It was a complete honour, especially to wear Bill's blazer with all the medals on. They were a lot younger than what the age I am now.
Quite an emotive thing to actually put one on and to adopt a pose of somebody that would have been leaving a landing craft or arriving on a beach at that time.
Some of them were obviously at school age, to put their life on the line, not knowing that they're going to have a future with a family and everything for the country. It's an amazing situation to put yourself in.
You sort of get a sense of what these guys had to go through when they were jumping in and off those things, because the uniforms are so heavy, and you can imagine being soaking wet and having to carry all that kit. Must have been very difficult.
The weight of the uniform was quite a lot. They must have been under complete pressure to go into battle wearing that type of kit.
Once Lewis got into Bill's uniform, it transformed him from the guy that I saw 5 minutes earlier. He then became a link between these two figures, the younger guy and the older guy.
It was really quite strange to see somebody else wearing his medals, wearing his jacket. He was the same sort of build as my father.
It's really important when you ask someone to create a sculpture that you're not keeping it between 2 confined limits. You're asking someone to put their 3 to 4 months of their life into it, and you can't turn around and say, it has to be this, his hands have to be there, he has to be sat in that position. And this is where Thomson has some licence to add a part of himself into that sculpture. It is a portrait of a man, but it's Thomson's portrait.
It's a lot more dirty and gritty the way I normally work. It's very much a primitive, sharp tool and a blunt stick banging against a piece of stone. So I find it quite intriguing that most of the figures are going to be scanned to adulterate the model, because it's not going to be exactly the same as the scanned image. I'm going to use that as a starting point. It's got to be a believable outfit, and you can't do that just thinking about it. So I'm just seeing this as a different way of producing a model for me to work from.
So he gets some idea of the detail and the placement of medals and how Bill used to wear his cap. It's almost that crossover between new technology and technology that goes back to Egyptian times and even earlier than that. A lot of the process is laborious, hard work of shaping up the original sandstone or millstone grit. You can get machines that could use this data and just cut out the image, but it won't be the same because Tom puts his mark on it. He brings things to life just by using his own thoughts and putting his own character into the piece.
So we've been using the Artec Leo. It's a much higher frame rate, which allows us to capture more fluid, dynamic poses of running, for instance, climbing out of water. After each scan, John's able to approve each pose, so it might take a couple of poses to get it into the right position. We'll do some certain amount of hole filling, manipulation to the data. Obviously there's certain areas that you can't get, so occlusions in clothing and undercuts that you can't see them with the scanner, so then we're going to have to add those in later.
This will then go on to a company called Stage 1 who are going to make life-size models out of plaster, and from there I can start to create the finished sculptures which will overlay these moulds. We're trying to create reality without it being too posed. Quite a difficult thing to do when you're sat in a studio and you're asking people to stand in certain poses, but we're going to have an enormous amount of detail, and then because I'm going to make these sculptures out of tiny little washers, the facial features will be blurred a little bit. There's something about the human mind that when it sees an image that is proportionally accurate, it starts to fill in the parts that are missing. And this will tell the story of modern day veterans looking back in time, looking at themselves in the past, and will hopefully convey that feeling of memory.